So I think when we look at the rise of fascist regimes such as Nazi Germany, we often ask ourselves how an entire society could be reordered in such a short period, how everything from before could be turned on its head, freedom stripped, people in prison, laws rewritten. But it's so much more than the legal aspect. I did another video touching on that a little bit, talking about the Enabling Act and how it allowed the Fuhrer to realign the whole of society to himself. But larger than that, in pre World War II Germany, there was a sort of movement or force within German society referred to as uh, Gleichschaltung, which means synchronization or coordination, but has also been called bringing into line or Nazification of state and society or just compliance. I've also heard it in recent times compared to the term preemptive capitulation. But the Nazi Deutsch or Nazi German, an English lexicon of the language of the Third Reich, defines Gleichschaltung as consolidation. All of the German social, political, and cultural organizations to be controlled and run according to the Nazi ideology and policy. All opposition to be eliminated. While historian Jane Kaplan, an expert on Nazi Germany, calls it the coordination of German institutions into a cohesive Nazified whole. Many individuals and institutions preemptively complied out of fear, opportunism, or alignment with Nazi goals and ideology. This process illustrates how societal control is built not just through election laws or violence, but through coordinated social and organizational structural changes throughout multiple levels of society, and serves to highlight the responsibility of individuals, institutions, organizations, and governments to uphold and defend pluralism, the rule of law, and human rights. Now, when Hitler was appointed Reich Chancellor on the 30th of January 1933, the Nazi Party had control of only 5 of the 17 German Länder, which were states or regions. After the Reichstag election of March 5th, 1933, the central government began in earnest its campaign to take over the state governments it did not yet control. So they began the process of Nazification of the Länder. Historian Ian Kershaw says, the pattern was in each case similar. Pressure on the non-Nazi state governments to place a National Socialist in charge of the police. Threatening demonstrations from SA and SS troops in the big cities. The symbolic raising of the swastika banner on town halls. The capitulation with hardly any resistance of the elected governments, the imposition of a Reich Kommissar under the pretext of restoring order. Despite the resemblance of legality, the usurpation of the powers of the Länder by the Reich was a plain breach of the Constitution. Force and pressure by the Nazi organizations themselves, political blackmail, had been solely responsible for creating the unrest that had prompted the alleged restorations or order. The terms of the emergency decree of February 28th provided no justification, since there was plainly no need for defense from any, quote, communist acts of violence endangering the state. The only such acts were those of the Nazis themselves. On the 14th of July 1933, the law against the founding of new parties banned all parties except the Nazi Party, resulting in a one-party government in all the Länder. The Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda under Joseph Goebbels in March 1933 assumed complete control of the press and all means of social communication. Newspapers, magazines, films, books, public meetings and ceremonies, foreign press relations, theater, art and music, radio, and television. They assumed complete control over all of it. Goebbels said, "The secret of propaganda is to permeate the person it aims to grasp without his even noticing that he is being permeated. Of course, propaganda has a purpose, but the purpose must be concealed with such cleverness and virtuosity that the person on whom this purpose is to be carried out doesn't notice it at all." Richard Evans, in his work The Third Reich in Power, said every national voluntary association and every local club was brought under Nazi control, from industrial and agricultural pressure groups to sports associations, football clubs, male voice choirs, women's organizations. In short, the whole fabric of associational life was Nazified. Rival politically oriented clubs of society were merged into a single Nazi body. Existing leaders of voluntary associations were either unceremoniously ousted or knuckled under of their own accord. Many organizations expelled leftish or liberal members and declared their allegiance to the new state and its institutions. The whole process went on all over Germany. By the end, virtually the only non-Nazi associations left were the army and the churches with their lay organizations. Purges of the civil service were extremely important to the process of Gleichschaltung. At every level of civil government, those who did not fall into line were purged and replaced with loyalists and ideologues. Civil servants began to rush to prove their loyalty by joining the Nazi Party, fearing loss of their jobs, social censure, or worse. The SA and SS used a combination of threats and violence to force people on a local level to resign or to fire others who were deemed racially or ideologically impure. While poaching and shutting down many organizations and institutions, the Nazi created new ones, some of which were compulsory for certain segments of society. For example, the Hitler Youth was mandatory for young Aryan boys and was seen as a precursor to indoctrinate them for service in the armed forces. The Jung Mädel, or Maidens, a program for young girls to prepare them to be happy and productive workers and mothers for Germany. All of this to ensure ideological purity and homogeneity across German society. The fear of standing out, speaking out, or being different in German society became one of the most overwhelming facets of the days after Hitler took power. One of the number one reasons for the tremendous numbers that attended Nazi rallies was the fear of being reported and ostracized, or worse, for not attending, and enthusiastically applauding citizens began reporting on each other for non-German activities and for non-German speech and ideas. And it became a self-perpetuating machine of repression and intolerance where everyone just tried to keep their heads down and not draw attention to themselves, lest the wrath of the state and social intolerance be drawn down upon them. After a few union leaders were arrested or threatened, the rest of the unions just voted to dissolve themselves and join the German Labor Front, the German Deutsche Arbeitersfront, or DAF. Newspapers and other forms of media communication were shut down or taken over, supposedly in order to compensate for an un-German and pro-communist bias in their reporting and information. Those that did remain became state-run media mouthpieces to spread the words of the Führer. The regime even tried to create one all-encompassing organization called Kraft durch Freude, Strength Through Joy, to oversee all hobbies and extra work activities that would be enjoyed by German workers, such as hiking, chess, woodworking, skiing, etc. Kraft durch Freude, Strength Through Joy, even offered vacations and family trips such as skiing and boat trips. Somewhere around 43 million Germans took vacation through the Strength Through Joy program. So, in this way, the regime invaded almost every single aspect of people's daily life in Germany, from school to work to their vacations, their hobbies. Everyone, everywhere was homogenized, and all presented the same opinions, the same racial profile, the same beliefs in the actions of the state. Any statements or actions in opposition were viewed with suspicion, contempt, or even hostility or hatred, or as a threat to the unity and the prosperity of the whole. At the very least, they would be punished with severe social sanctions, even worse, financial or legal repercussions, up to and including going to concentration camps. This shows the dangers of a homogenized society. The people who always say that they want to live with other people that are just like them, who gets to determine what the model is for that? And then who gets to determine what the enforcement mechanism is for the social model? What happened in Nazi Germany is the natural endpoint. It is the rational endpoint of that type of thought, that insular, nationalist, isolationist, xenophobic mindset, in which if you're not just like me, then there's something wrong with you, and you're probably plotting against me. When in realities, it's the ones telling you how you need to live your life and that everybody else is a threat that isn't like you that are usually the ones you need to worry about. So, what can we learn from this? We learned that plurality is a safeguard for everyone in a society, not just the marginalized and the minorities. The existence and celebration of plurality in a society keeps everyone safe.